Long before the flush of a toilet or the hum of an air freshener, going to the bathroom was not just a matter of necessity. It was a daily trial of survival. In the time of mammoths and stone axes, relieving oneself was an act tangled in fear, filth, and ferocity. Without plumbing, privacy, or even a proper hole in the ground, early humans faced a stinking reality that shaped their behavior, their communities, and even their evolution. But how did this most basic human function become such a defining and disgusting part of our history? Let's find out. Before language, before fire, before the wheel, there was waste, and where there was waste, there was danger. Early humans, living in loose bands of hunters and gatherers, learned quickly that what they left behind could invite death. The scent of feces wasn't just a nuisance, it was a beacon for predators. Lions, hyenas, and even rival tribes could follow the putrid trail straight to a vulnerable camp. So they adapted. In some regions, humans traveled far from camp to relieve themselves, choosing rocky outcrops or dense underbrush, always watching their backs. Others dug shallow pits, covering their waist with soil and leaves, not out of hygiene, but strategy. The earth itself became an ally in the war against stench and blood. But this instinct bred tension. Some claimed preferred areas, shade, safety, distance, while others contested them. What began as a necessity turned into a territorial dispute. A man squatting in another's chosen spot could spark violence. It wasn't just about dignity, it was about dominance. Even waste in the wild tapestry of survival became a tool of power. As humans began settling in semi-permanent encampments, their relationship with excrement evolved, but not necessarily for the better. The dung piles grew. There were no designated bathrooms, only patterns behind the boulder near the old tree down by the creek, and those patterns became known, remembered, and fought over. Anthropologists have uncovered early evidence of latrine zones used by Neanderthals, dense areas of compacted soil rich with phosphate indicating repeated human waste. These weren't designed for sanitation. They were crude, smelly dumping grounds, often too close to sleeping areas, causing sickness, drawing insects, and breeding parasites. But to give ground on a latrine site, that was weakness. Control over the defecation zone meant status. Leaders of a tribe might claim the most convenient or secluded spot. Others squatted on the outskirts, forced to brave snakes, thorns, or enemy scouts. What seems like a mundane act today was once a daily reminder of one's place in the tribe's brutal pecking order. And when one tribe stumbled upon the waste trail of another, it wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. We're here. This is ours. Waste became both map and message, a crude communication of presence and threat. Eventually, someone had the idea. What if we dug deeper? It seemed brilliant at first. A pit covered with branches could contain the smell, reduce pests, and offer a sense of order. But early dung pits, dug without planning or understanding of sanitation, became time bombs. Bacteria festered, rain spread contamination, children fell in. People got sick, very sick. These first rudimentary toilets often sat near food sources or water runoff. Entire clans were wiped out by dysentery and cholera before such diseases even had names. No one understood why. Some believed it was the wrath of angry spirits cursing the land for disrespecting it. Others thought waste itself held a dark magic, a dangerous essence that needed to be hidden, even feared. In some cultures, rituals began to form. Men refused to speak after relieving themselves until they had cleansed their breath. Women were forbidden from squatting in certain areas on moonless nights. Fear turned to superstition. The simple act of relieving oneself became surrounded by taboos and whispers. But one thing was certain, the dung pit was no solution. It was a step into chaos, a lesson burned into early human memory with every infection, every death, every stinking, bubbling pit. One evening, deep in the Paleolithic dusk, someone threw a turd into the fire. Maybe it was an accident, maybe it was boredom, but what followed was unforgettable. A sickening sizzle, a rank stench that clung to the nose and burned the throat. Fire had met feces and it changed everything. This moment, absurd as it sounds, was a turning point. Early humans realized that waste burned. Dry dung could feed the fire, especially in regions barren of trees. In the cold steppe, mammoth dung became precious fuel, but the benefits came with invisible consequences. Burning human feces, especially in enclosed caves, released noxious fumes. Eyes burned, lungs inflamed. People grew sick in ways they couldn't explain. Still, the allure of fire over filth persisted. In some camps, dung heaps were regularly torched, the smoke seen as purification. Others believed the flames cleansed the evil trapped in excrement. Some tribes developed fire rituals, setting communal waste alight during full moons to appease angry gods or banish illness. But with fire came division. Those who controlled the flames, who knew how to burn dung safely, gained power. The waste handlers became priests, guards, or pariahs. And from the smoke of burning filth rose new beliefs beliefs, new fears, and a new kind of mastery over nature's darkest byproduct. As humans built early villages, they brought their filth with them and paid dearly. Without sewers or flowing water, waste collected quickly. The same river that offered fresh fish became a poison stream when used for washing, drinking, and defecation alike. The results were catastrophic. Skeletons from Neolithic settlements show clear signs of parasitic infection. Enlarged bones, twisted joints, teeth worn by vomiting and fever. Entire populations shrank under the invisible hand of disease. No walls could keep out the rot once it festered beneath your home. And so the myths began. The latrine curse was whispered across ancient cultures. If someone disrespected the earth, relieved themselves too close to a shrine, or allowed their waste to touch sacred soil, they invited divine retribution. Crops failed, children died, livestock went mad. Priests carved warnings in stone, commanding villagers to bury their waste far and deep. Some towns outlawed certain times of day to defecate. Others built terrifying effigies to guard their waste zones, scarecrows made not for birds but for humans. Yet these superstitions weren't foolish. They were the early attempts at public health. Rough, fear-driven, and desperate. Through curses and taboos, communities tried to avoid the very real specter of death that loomed behind every pile of filth. It was the Roman Empire that dared what few had attempted, to make going to the bathroom a social event. They built the first known public latrines, stone benches with neatly carved holes, a stream of water running below to carry waste away. It was genius. It was revolutionary. It was revolting. These latrines were loud, crowded, and utterly lacking in privacy. Dozens of citizens sat side by side, gossiping, grunting, and wiping themselves with communal sponges soaked in vinegar. There were no walls, no partitions, and certainly no shame. Senators did their business beside slaves. Philosophers debated while defecating. For some, it was the heart of the empire's daily rhythm. But under the stone and aqueducts lurked a horror. Rats, snakes, and even large insects often crawled up the plumbing. There are accounts of men leaping from their seats, bitten in the most vulnerable places by what they called latrine demons. Fires were sometimes lit to drive the creatures back down. Worse still, these latrines often overflowed. A heavy rain could send the sewage streaming back into the streets. Disease rippled through the city in waves. Typhus, cholera, and fevers with no names. The baths and the bathrooms, both Roman symbols of progress, became breeding grounds for death. So while Rome bathed in marble glory above, beneath the surface, its public toilets told another story. One of waste, woe, and the price of civilization's ambition. As empires fell and kingdoms rose, the elite distanced themselves from the stink of the masses. But not as far as you'd think. Castles may have had thrones, but they weren't the kind you'd envy. Royals sat high above deep pits and cold stone towers, garderobes they were called. And while they offered a degree of privacy, they were far from clean. The waste fell freely, often down the side of the castle wall or into shallow moats, which were then supposed to carry it away. But when the wind blew wrong or rain clogged the channels, the stench returned with a vengeance. In some places, servants were assigned to stand at the base of these chutes, scraping and clearing blockages. Imagine that job, earning your bread beneath the royal posterior. And yet, despite the filth, kings and queens believed themselves superior in hygiene. They bathed rarely, sprayed perfumes to mask smells, and convinced themselves that the stink of others, peasants and foreigners, was to blame for disease. They even made claims of having divine bodies immune to infection. But history paints another picture. Monarchs fell ill, nobles died in waves, and palace floors became slippery with rot. The truth was buried beneath silks and ceremony. No amount of gold could mask the fact that everyone, everywhere, was drowning in their own waste. It was the smell in the end that changed everything. Disgust became the engine of progress. The overwhelming, suffocating stench of humanity forced minds to think, to plan, to build. Sewers were dug not out of ingenuity alone, but out of desperation. The ancient cities that choked on their own filth, Babylon, Rome, and Paris, couldn't survive without confronting the stink. Disgust led to design. Design led to discipline. Cleanliness slowly became a virtue. Religion embraced it, medicine preached it, and politics enforced it. Laws were passed against dumping waste in the streets. Engineers created underground tunnels. Soap was refined. Toilets finally began to flush. But even now, with porcelain thrones and scented sprays, the shadow of our filthy past lingers. Disgust still shapes us. It dictates where we live, who we trust, how we treat the homeless, the sick, the poor. It's primal, powerful, and deeply human. And so from squatting in the bushes to plumbing under skyscrapers, the long, revolting journey of going to the bathroom reveals not just how we survived, but how we became civilized. From fear to fire and superstition to sanitation, the dirty truth is that humanity was shaped by its own waste. The struggle against filth forged empires, myths, and even morality. Still think the toilet is just a convenience? Think again. Subscribe for more stories that flush out the dark side of history, and let us know in the comments what filthy secret you want unearthed next. Want to discover more about Stone Age life? From hunting techniques to ancient tools, there's so much more to explore about how our ancestors survived and thrived. Subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from the Stone Age.